Hello, my name is Big Bubble. I sometimes go by the name of Simon, and this is a thoughts video. A thoughts video on probably the biggest news that's come out of Gen Con, and that is a new game that was announced by Fantasy Flight Games. It is a card game designed by Richard Garfield, who did Magic the Gathering, he did Android Netrunner, and he's done a few other games. But really, what they announced was something a bit different. This is Keyforge, Call of the Archons. It's coming out later this year, in 2018, and what it is, it's a card game where you'll be summoning creatures to the battlefield. You'll then be trying to collect amber, which is the sort of resource that you use to power keys. Once you have powered 3 keys, you then win the game. So seems pretty straightforward. You kind of can summon monsters, you can kind of give them upgrades, you can kind of maybe play a spell card or summon like an artifact to boost your power. But here's the interesting thing about the game. There are no booster packs. Normally you would have, say, a trading card game like Magic the Gathering, where you would open up a booster pack and you would have a random assortment of cards with different rarities. You know, you might have 1 rare, you might have like 5 uncommons and then 2 uncommons. Or you could have like a living card game or a collectible card game, which is more like you buy a booster pack or you buy a sealed product, and that will contain all the cards for the set. Now, what Keyforge has done, and what Richard Garfield has done, is he's designed a game that you will open up a deck, a sealed product deck, containing 36 cards, and that's all you can play with. The deck is going to be randomized to a large extent, and you essentially are going to open up the deck, and that is the deck you play with, which is quite cool. It's a quite unique concept. However, it has got a lot of people worrying. A lot of people are thinking, well, you know, what happens if I don't get the cards I want? Maybe I don't get the faction you want. So you see, there's 7 houses in the game, and each of the house kind of plays off a different trope of mechanics in a card game. So for example, you might have the Brobner, who are these massive hulking brutes or big creatures. You might have the Sanctum, which is a house full of creatures and effects that do protection. They protect your creatures. Or you might, for example, have Dis, which is a house that allows you to bring things back from the graveyard. It sounds very familiar to Magic. Magic has the 5 core colors, and each of them represent a different thing. So blue is all about drawing spells and being clever. Green's all about big stumpy creatures. White's all about protection and life. So you can kind of see how they've done a similar thing here. The big thing is, when you buy a deck, you'll be given 3 out of the 7 houses. It's completely randomized. You don't know which houses you're going to be getting, but you'll be getting 3 out of the 7. And that's quite cool, but what that means for a lot of people is, what will happen if I get a deck that I don't like? For example, maybe if you take me, for example, I just like to have cool combos that I can do. They might not win me the game, but I enjoy doing them. Other people might just want to play with big stumpy creatures, but if they don't get that house, it means they're going to have to play with a different deck. And that's kind of a money sink. Now, sure, one of Richard Garfield's biggest aims with this is to remove 2 things. Firstly, he wanted to remove card rarity from the second hand consumer market. What that means is you often got cases in Magic the Gathering where you would drop, say, $5 on a booster pack. You would open up the cards, you would go online and see the card that you pulled, the rare card that you got that you were excited about. It's only actually worth like 50 cents or $1. And that feels disheartening. Or what a lot of people do is chase the dream. They chase the perfect deck. You know, you can go online nowadays and you can get deck decking, which is people who have posted very much played and tested decks for people to basically win tournaments with or just win against their friends. And what Richard Garfield has kind of done with Archon or Keyforge is he wanted to remove that. So when you buy a deck, that's the only things you can play with. Now, sure, there is the case where, oh, but what happens if I use sleeves? I can just sleeve my cards and remove the faction identity or remove the deck identity for them. And yes, you could do that, but every sanctioned event or every tournament event is only going to be sealed, which means you go there, you'll probably spend like 15 or maybe $12, 10 for the deck, and then the rest will be for prize support. And you'll get a deck and you'll have to play it. And that's quite cool. That is a really fun challenge. For me as a player, I think that's a really interesting concept. I love in Magic getting drafts. Drafts are where you kind of open up booster packs and you pick and choose cards to build a deck out of for later. This is kind of this, it's skipping that process and it's skipping the deck building process. And I can't help but be intrigued. However, at the same time, as a designer, I'm quite worried because you see, Fantasy Flight Games is boasting that every deck is randomized. Now, they can do that because, well, they have a really cool naming system. Basically, every deck will be randomized in terms of cards, but also randomized in terms of their identity. You'll be given a name. So these names could be extremely weird things from Grognag, the Devourer of Worlds, to Mephistos, Keymaster, or it could be something like Shimmerbright, the Cheerful Fairy. It's wild and wacky, and if you go online, you can see some of the examples of the naming systems. And your deck will have a back to it that has that name to it, and that's how they kind of limit you to plain owning that deck, and your cards will be then identified by that name. And again, very cool. But my worry is in terms of the game design, because for me, I know Richard Garfield is a good designer. He's done some really fantastic games. But for me, I'm kind of sitting back and wondering, well, if you are relying on the randomization of these decks, and this is complete randomization, there is some restrictions. So, for example, what Richard Garfield mentioned is if you have a deck and a lot of cards reference robots, so for example, maybe draw a robot card, you're not going to end up in a situation where the deck doesn't have any robot types. It's going to have robot cards. So the randomization algorithms that they're using have put in place some restrictions, kinda. That being said, however, there's no real control over deck strength. And that's interesting. You could play with a deck that just is subpar to another person's deck. You could have the exact same houses. So, for example, you could say get a deck that contains Sanctum, Logos, and Shadows. And another person could open up their deck and it contains the same thing. Sanctum, Shadows, and Logos for their houses. But one of those decks might be stronger than the other one simply because they have a better selection of cards that are maybe more powerful or maybe work well together a bit more. And it makes me worried. There is about 350 cards in a set, so there is a possibility that you can collect all the cards. But again, that's not the aim of this. Now, from the gameplay I've seen, it looks pretty simple. It looks pretty straightforward. People have said that it's not as overly wrought as something like Magic the Gathering. It doesn't take too long. It takes only about 30 minutes to play. And I can see maybe being a person that enjoys collecting stuff, I can see myself being attached to a deck. It reminds me a lot of things like not Magic the Gathering, but things like Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! The television series, which was all about the card game. But each time there was a new episode, it would be about maybe a new character, and the character would have a deck that kind of is thematically themed about that person. So, for example, there might be a guy that's all about insects, and he has an insect deck, or there might be a guy that's all about the sea, and he has a sea deck. And there's a nice connection there. There's like, this is my deck of cards. This is my personal one. And it'll be interesting to see if that kind of attachment can be formed with the player base. Overall, however, I am excited about this. It doesn't seem too expensive. It's about $40 for the starter kit, which contains 2 preset decks and then 2 random decks. And then you also can buy a sealed product, which is going to be $10 for a random deck. And honestly, that sounds like a pretty good deal. If the gameplay is fun, that's crucial. If the gameplay is fun, it doesn't feel like you're being screwed over by the cards you're given in your deck, then I can see this picking up some steam, especially now that Android Netrunner has gone to the wayside because of licensing issues, and Magic the Gathering isn't doing so hot right now. They had a good set with Dominion, which was designed by Richard Garfield, and they're going on to Return to Ravnica now. But a lot of people have been losing faith in Wizards of the Coast and their reliability to put out good Magic sets. again, I should also probably just speak on the card art just before we end off, and that is, I enjoy the card art that I'm seeing. You see this lovely picture here, and really, I like it a lot. It reminds me of two things. It reminds me a lot of Hearthstone, the more cartoonish, the more wacky, the more crazy. You know, every card is inviting, every card has like a real story to tell in it. It's kind of different from Magic, which is Magic is very self-controlled in the styling, whereas this doesn't seem to be all over the place, but they have gone for a more brighter, stand-outish approach. And what this means is it reminds me heavily of a game or MMO game called Wildstar, and that was kind of this space faring game where you all ended up on one planet and you're trying to take control of it. Overall, I can't help but admire the art, and I think I'm going to have a fun time playing it. That being said, however, I'm not sure I'm going to have a good time with the longevity of it. I think this might be a system that is good for maybe 2 plays, 3 plays. You might move on to another deck, play a couple more games with it. But then after that, you really maybe have experienced everything there is about the game. That being said, we still have to see how it works. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. I hope you have enjoyed this somewhat of a thoughts video. I will be doing a proper thoughts video once the game comes out and I actually have a bit more idea of how it plays. But if you have any comments, maybe you have your own personal opinions on what you think this kind of randomization of decks is doing to the industry, if you think it's unique game design, if you think it's great that they're trying something different, especially for Fantasy Flight games, or if you think it's just kind of maybe just a fad, really. If you have enjoyed this video, remember to hit the like button. If you haven't enjoyed this video for whatever reason, hit the dislike button. But of course, leave me a comment. Let me know how I can improve this. I always make sure to put out at least 1 video a week. So if you do subscribe, you'll make sure that you'll get those. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. Thank you so much for watching.